5 years ago, I took a risk and I walked outside my apartment building and talked to the first man experiencing homelessness that I've ever spoke to. In the midst of our conversation, I asked this man if I can paint his portrait. He said yes, and that launched me on a journey that we now know as Faces of Santa Ana, where I go out into my community, paint portraits of my neighbors experiencing homelessness, sell the artwork, and then use the money to help them in their needs, help pursue their dreams and wishes, and then also build relationship and trust. Faces of Santa Ana, it's weird, it didn't really start with an idea from me. I felt like I was actually reading a book about what it looks like to love people. And I'm on my couch night after night reading this book about what does it look like to love your neighbor, your wife, your coworkers. What does it look like to make love in action? And as I'm reading this book, I heard these screams from a man experiencing homelessness. And I thought to myself, do I love that guy? And so I looked at my wife and said, I need to go meet him. I need to go meet the man who's been screaming outside of our building for a month now that I've ignored. And so it was this action, it was this thing inside of me where I had to take the risk. I had to step out and speak to someone and befriend someone that was not like me at all. Not my same race, not my same socioeconomic background, he didn't even have a home, but he was my neighbor and he's now my friend. And so that's how Faces of Santa Ana was born. That was the start of it. And so I never sat down and actually dreamed up this idea of what would it look like to paint portraits of people. My motivation was, what would it look like for me to get to know the guy who nobody knows in our neighborhood? The one guy who's always screaming that everybody crosses the street and says, I don't want to be next to that guy. And so that was my motivation. And then in the midst of our first conversation, something from within my heart, I just asked him, hey man, can I paint your portrait? And that's how the portraits actually started. So behind me, you'll see a mural that says unity through the bond of peace. And that statement's important. The most important word I think in there is bond. And if we do things in a bond of peace, like a bond is something deep, a bond is something real, right? And so I've made bonds with people on the streets. I have friends that are homeless, right? And so what would it look like for us as a people to pursue peace, to be the peacemakers, to establish unity in a way that is real and deep? And that's what the mural behind us is actually about. It's about diversity in both age, gender, thoughts, all kind of situations of heroes of ours, and linking it together, you can see a DNA strand. And so the statement of this wall is that we are all the same. We're all human beings. We all have the same internals. And what would it look like to bond ourselves together in unity and peace? And I would say that in order to do that, we have to be comfortable taking risks. We have to confront fear, and we have to step out and do things we've never done. So on the Unity Wall, we'll start with the design process. This was actually a pretty interesting project for us. It was actually sort of envisioned by a woman who I know. Her name is Ruth Prentice. She went to college with me. And she called me one morning and she said, Brian, I was on a run and I feel like I had a vision from God. That's what she said. And she said, I saw this wall that was blue on one side, red on the other side, and the blue and red are blending to become purple in the middle. And it was obviously sort of a take on the political atmosphere of red versus blue now, but it's even deeper than that, right? And so she said, could you find a wall, install this mural somewhere, I'll fund it, and together we can have a wall where people stand in the middle and they say, I'm not gonna be divisive, I'm gonna be a unifying peacemaker. And so that was the initial charge, and then we needed to find a wall. So I had spoken here at Osea Charter School a couple times. I always make it a point to take my art into schools to inspire children. And I knew Osea wanted a mural. So I said, hey, I have someone that wants to fund a mural. Would you give us your wall? And so then it became a collaborative process. I told them the wall has to have blue and red becoming purple in the middle. But then the wall, we want you to sort of put input on who the faces would be on the wall. So the faces you see behind us are largely chosen by students and colleagues of Osea, their board, their executive directors. And so it was a true collaboration. And we had a bunch of names and filtered them down. So now here we get to the names. So the first person on the left is Rosa Parks. Obviously everybody knows what Rosa Parks did for sort of civil rights and for the rights of African Americans. So she's memorialized on the wall behind us. Next is Malala. I didn't even know who Malala was when the name was recommended, so I got to do a little bit of a history lesson myself. So Malala was fighting for educational rights in Pakistan for women and children. She was actually shot in the head in the midst of a protest, but she's still fighting. She's actually up for a Nobel Peace Prize for her work. And so Malala is right next to Rosa Parks. Right after that, we have Einstein, who's just like a picture perfect person of imagination, someone that lives or lived to show us that we can be dreamers, that we can do impossible things. On the other side of him, we have Frida Kahlo, who is so much of a hero here in Santa Ana. She's a fine artist, and we've had a lot of people stop their cars, come up and take pictures in front of Frida. There's something about her that connects with the people of Santa Ana in a way that really no one else on the wall does. It's pretty incredible. Right after that, we have Martin Luther King, obviously civil rights and such a leader, both in thoughts and a great orator that has inspired us all to live lives worthy of love, really. And last on the wall is Cesar Chavez, and he led a farm workers sort of revival. He fought for their rights and equal employment and things of that nature. And he's also an amazing hero here in Santa Ana. We've had a lot of people stop and say, I'm so grateful to see Chavez on the wall. And so those are the, 6 people behind me that represent this first Unity mural. We hope to see many more of these in other cities. I'd love to just share about my greater dream. So you might watch this video and say, Brian has achieved his dreams, right? But there's still big dreams that scare me that are in my heart. And I dream of seeing Faces of Santa Ana, which started here, in other cities around the world. And so we've launched Faces of Anaheim. We have an artist doing Faces of Riverside. We have an artist doing Faces of Detroit. There's actually potential for a Faces of Liberia in Africa. And all these things scare me. All these things are walls of fear that I have to push through. I have to sort of find the administration, the time, the know-how, the wisdom of how to walk these things out into the earth. But my organization called Faces of Mankind, I dream of seeing artists and students and people around the world carry a mantle and say, I'm gonna use my art to love my neighbors. And so that's my big dream. That's the one that scares me. And anybody watching, I encourage you to share your dream that scares you with someone else. Share that big dream that seems impossible. Because once you speak it, it comes from out of your body. Now it's real. It's in front of us. We can talk about it. And so I hope dialogue begins after this video.